No one ever really thought much of humans. At best, they were considered persistent. At worst, pests. In a galaxy where most species measured history in millennia, humanity's few thousand years of recorded civilization didn't impress anyone. They were tolerated, barely, given crumbs of space territory, assigned to dead-end trade routes and backwater diplomatic posts. Even their so-called fleet was a joke, a collection of patched-up cruisers with aging tech and more rust than threat. And humans? They didn't argue. They didn't protest. They just smiled. Smiled too much, some said. But everyone remembered the incident at Dilax Prime. It started with a flare in the outer systems, an uncharted region humans had claimed for research purposes. Most species thought it was just another excuse to dig up rocks and pretend they had something of value. But the flare wasn't natural. It was a pulse, a signal, and it didn't just reach the nearby star systems. It reached the Council Core itself. The pulse carried frequencies so old, so embedded in the root layers of galactic technology, it triggered panic in species who hadn't felt fear in generations. A High Council emergency meeting was called within hours. "They're building something," hissed the Thoraxian representative, her translucent skin vibrating with tension. It came from Human Sector 9, no authorization. No explanation. No. Respect for Council authority. The Kral Dominion's ambassador, a reptilian brute named Kolzeth, slammed his claw on the metal desk. "They are primitives. They've always been primitives. They couldn't build a proper fusion drive without begging the Saurians for schematics." Then, the room's lights flickered. Every datapad, hologram, and AI node in the chamber went dead. A single screen blinked on. It was grainy footage, unfiltered, unbranded, old. A ship. Number not a ship. A monolith the size of a moon, dragging itself out of the shadow of a dying gas giant. Its hull was blacker than vacuum, etched with faded symbols that no translation algorithm could decode. It didn't glow. It drank light. It was older than any Council ship ever recorded, thousands of years older, possibly more, and it flew a flag none of them had ever seen. Except one. The Tralvex Archivist, a species that claimed to remember every known event in galactic history, gasped audibly. "That sigil? It's pre-Council, pre-Calorith War, pre-everything. It's forbidden." Someone in the shadows spoke. A soft voice. Calm. "We never said we were weak," the voice said. "You just assumed." A figure stepped into view on the screen. Human. Older man, maybe in his 70s, wearing no uniform, no insignia, just a faded jacket and gloves too worn to belong in a Council broadcast. "My name is Admiral Rion Ward," he said, "and what you're seeing is Vessel 7A Nix, 1 of 12. The room erupted, shouting, hissing, vocal cords vibrating across species. The Kral ambassador demanded to know how a barely civilized race could possess ships of that size. The Thoraxian called it a bluff, a video illusion. The Tralvex archivist trembled. "That ship was listed as a myth," he whispered. "It was said to have destroyed the Seraphine Empire with a single orbital breach. That empire lasted 80,000 years. Admiral Ward didn't smile. "We found them," he said simply. "We didn't build them, but we figured them out, eventually." "And you didn't tell us?" a voice snarled from the Council floor. Ward tilted his head. "You never asked." Then the screen cut out. For a moment, no one moved. Even the air in the chamber seemed frozen. The Council Core, unchallenged for over 90,000 years, had just been reminded of something it forgot. Humanity wasn't young. They were hiding something ancient. And now, they weren't hiding anymore. Panic doesn't spread through the galaxy like it does on a single planet. It's quieter, colder, like a crack in the hull of a ship, barely visible, but deadly if ignored. Within 2 standard days of Admiral Ward's message, 5 major empires declared emergency alerts. Not war, not yet, but full-spectrum surveillance on all human sectors. Trade lanes were suddenly under review. Diplomats were recalled. Ambassadors were instructed to smile, nod, and dig for answers. But Earth gave none. The humans acted like nothing had happened. No press conference, no follow-up statement, not even a rebuttal to the swirling rumors. The Council tried sending messages through official channels. Earth replied once, with a standard form, acknowledged. That was it. But underneath the silence, things were moving. Fast. On the fringes of the Eridani expanse, a border patrol from the Yulari Consortium picked up strange movement in the dark sectors. Gravity shifts, warp tunnel fluctuations, long dead wormholes showing signs of reactivation. It was impossible, but the readings were undeniable. Something massive was moving. Several somethings. Aboard the Yulari scout vessel Silver Chime, Ensign Carrick's watched the long-range scans again. The ship's sensors kept mislabeling the blips as small moons. Then the computer would crash and reboot. Every single time. "This is tech interference?" he asked the engineer. "No," she said, her fronds twitching in alarm. "This is gravitic distortion. Something's displacing space itself." They stared at the readings. The blips were heading toward central trade routes. Not fast, not urgent, but steady, like they were following a pattern, a flight path. Meanwhile, back on Earth, things weren't as calm as they looked. The existence of the Nyx-class ships had been kept secret for centuries, not because of fear, but because of what they represented. When the ships were first discovered in the Kuiper Belt nearly 300 years ago, they weren't operational. They weren't even identifiable as ships at first, just impossible structures buried in layers of rock and ice, almost like they'd been placed there. It took 5 generations of silent engineering, lost lives, and black-budget programs before Nyx 7A moved for the first time. Not under its own power, but enough to prove it could. Admiral Ward had been one of the first engineers. Before the title, before the rank, before the secrets. He'd seen its insides, he'd touched its walls, and he'd heard its hum. Not a machine's hum, something deeper, like it was aware, listening. Now, as he stood in a hangar bay deep beneath the surface of Mars, watching teams load antimatter cores into auxiliary vessels, he couldn't shake the chill. They weren't ready, but they couldn't stay hidden anymore. "You shouldn't have revealed Nyx yet," a voice said behind him. Ward turned. Commander Ilya Sang, his second-in-command. Younger, sharper, but the same haunted look in her eyes. "They were going to find out anyway," Ward replied. "The pulse woke up more than the ships. We had no choice." Sang looked away. "Some of the old code is rewriting itself. Autonomous systems running protocols we never authorized. It's like the ships are preparing." "For what?" She didn't answer. A low rumble echoed through the hangar. Not an explosion, more like a vibration passing through the bones of the station. Lights flickered, screens glitched, then a voice, ancient and synthetic, played across the intercom. "Primary directive, asset defense, timeline alignment confirmed, engaging protocol Omega reveal." Ward's breath caught in his throat. They hadn't written that protocol. Hell, they didn't even know it existed. Did that come from Nyx?" Sang asked. Ward nodded slowly. "It came from all 12 monolithic ships, each buried for millennia, older than any known empire, now waking and revealing themselves to everyone." The reveal shattered what little calm remained in the galaxy. The Council tried to maintain order, but you could hear the fear in their voices, no longer cloaked in protocol or pride. The public didn't help either. News feeds, pirate broadcasts, and rogue AIs flooded the datanet with theories. The humans had allied with ancient beings. The ships were planet killers. The Terrans were planning a coup. Some even claimed the ships weren't built. They were grown. But humanity said nothing. No denials, no threats, just silence. Until the second ship appeared. It came out of the dark edge of Sector Helion 4, cloaked in an event field so thick it blacked out 6 nearby satellites. When the Nyx 9D ship, designation Valkyr, emerged, it didn't fire. It didn't speak. It just hovered in orbit above the Yulari moon colony and scanned every structure, every transmission, every living organism. Then it moved on. No one stopped it. No one even tried. The Yulari High Voice, known for her disdain of soft species, stepped down from office the next day. She cited existential unease. Meanwhile, Earth's skies were no longer private. Cloaked vessels from at least 14 known species patrolled nearby, gathering what scraps they could. Most tried stealth. Others posed as merchants, diplomats, even tourists. But it didn't matter. Humanity didn't stop them. It was as if they didn't care who saw what, because no one could do anything about it. Inside the Mars Command Hub, Admiral Ward paced in front of a live 3D star map. Red lines marked where the Nyx vessels had been detected in the last 72 hours. 7 out of 12 had moved, each one charting a path toward specific systems, some occupied, others long dead. "They're not patrolling," Sang said quietly. "They're positioning." Ward nodded grimly. "Strategic formation, like chess pieces setting the board." She hesitated. "For war?" Ward turned slowly. "Number not war. Defense. They're preparing for something else." Outside the bunker, in orbit above Phobos, Nyx 7A, Calliope, remained still. Its surface absorbed scans. Its core pulsed with something far deeper than power. A rhythm, a heartbeat. And deep inside its engine room, where even the most advanced Terran engineers dared not tamper too much, something was growing. A crystalline structure, pulsing blue-white, laced with data lines that twisted and flexed like veins. No human had ever seen it form. Until now. Dr. Nadia Vale, lead xenotech scientist, watched from a secure pod as the structure unfolded. She didn't speak. Couldn't. Her throat locked with a mixture of terror and awe. The reading said it wasn't alive, but her instincts said otherwise. Then it spoke, not out loud, not through speakers. It whispered in her head. Threat inbound. Origin. Galactic outer spiral. Entity classification. Unknown hostile. Temporal reach. Pre-council epoch. Defensive systems activating. Vale's eyes widened. Wait, you're saying something's coming? The light inside the crystal flared. Protocol Omega Reveal was not to assert dominance. It was to warn the others. Defense grid must unify. Delay is extinction. She scrambled to the control pad, linking directly to Ward's console. Her message was short. Admiral, it's not about us. The ships weren't built for conquest. They're waking up because something worse is on its way. Back in orbit, the other Nyx ships began to realign. Galactic empires once feared for their control. Now they feared for their survival. And only the humans, those underestimated, overlooked, ridiculed humans, had the keys to the last defense the galaxy didn't even know existed. Until now. The briefing room beneath Olympus Mons had never been so tense. Generals, admirals, and intelligence heads from Earth's shadow agencies sat in tight silence, some with clenched fists, others with twitching fingers against the cool steel table. At the center, a projected hollow of the Nyx fleet pulsed in eerie synchronization, like the beat of a buried titan. Admiral Ward stood with a calm that only age and buried secrets could grant. "They're not weapons," he began, nodding toward the ships. "Not in the way we thought. They're sentinels, guardians of something older than us, older than the Council, older than everything we've built." "What the hell does that mean?" barked General Romani from Earth Command. "We've been pouring black budget money into these things for 2 centuries thinking they were warships. You're saying they're part of some ancient defense system?" Ward didn't flinch. "Yes." Commander Sang took over, pointing to the shifting symbols projected by Nix 7A. "The crystal inside Calliope, the one we've been monitoring since it formed, it's an interface. Not man-made, not even mechanical in the traditional sense. It grows, it learns, and it told Dr. Vale something terrifying. A threat is coming from outside the galaxy. Not just alien. Hostile in nature, ancient in origin, and far more advanced than anything we've seen." Another intelligence chief leaned forward. "And this threat conveniently shows up just as we finish reactivating the ships?" Ward looked him straight in the eye. "You think we control the timing? These ships woke up because the threat entered their detection range. They've been waiting, probably for millions of years. We just happened to be the poor souls holding the ignition keys when the alarm went off." The room quieted. No one had the guts to ask what the alarm meant, because deep down, they already knew. "So what do we do?" Romani finally asked. Ward turned to the star map. "We get the galaxy ready, even if they hate us, even if they fear us." "Why would we do that?" someone muttered. "They've treated us like garbage for centuries." Ward stared at the pulsing map of the Nix vessels. "Because when this thing arrives, they'll all be dead in weeks if we don't. Every single species, every planet, every empire. We're not protecting them because we owe them anything." He paused. "We're protecting them because we're the only ones who can." Far across the stars, aboard a Kral Dominion dreadnought near the Ruel Expanse, panic was setting in. The dreadnought's scanners had just recorded an impossible reading. A single dark mass, too large to be a ship, too irregular to be an asteroid, had entered real space at the farthest edge of the galactic rim. It didn't move like anything known. It didn't follow warp lane laws. It drifted through space like it was swimming through molasses, distorting everything in its wake. It sent no messages, no signals, only a low-frequency pulse, a groan, like metal tearing through the soul of the void. Captain Dresk of the Kral forces leaned toward his sensor chief. "Run that pulse through every database." "I did," the sensor chief said, scales pale with fear. "It matches the old codes from the Tomb of Stars, from before recorded time. Before the Council," Dresk stiffened. "You're saying it's real?" The chief nodded. "It's not just real. It's moving toward us." Back on Mars, Ward received the transmission from the Kral dreadnought. The ship's feed showed a grainy silhouette, something vast and terrible emerging from darkness, half organic, half mechanical, with lights like dying suns and limbs that moved as though they were stitched from space itself. Ward felt a pit grow in his stomach. "This is it," Sang whispered beside him. "The thing the Nix ships were built for." Ward didn't reply. He just opened a secure channel to the Council. He didn't bother with diplomacy this time. "This is Admiral Ward of Earth. You wanted the truth? Here it is. An ancient threat is coming. We don't care if you trust us. You're either going to help us stop it." He paused, letting the signal catch across the stars. "Or you're going to die scared and alone." The transmission ended. The galaxy had mocked humanity for centuries. Now it waited for them to act, because now Earth was the last hope standing between life and annihilation. The Council didn't respond immediately. For nearly 12 hours, Admiral Ward's message went unanswered. But the silence wasn't empty. It was full of movement, panicked communications between empires, hidden data leaks, and a flurry of unmarked ships rerouting from leisure worlds to fortress systems. The galaxy's rulers had spent centuries mocking Earth, but they hadn't survived this long by being completely stupid. The images from the Kral dreadnought had spread like a virus. No one could deny what they'd seen. Something was coming. And only the humans had prepared. In a private war chamber aboard the orbital defense platform above Saturn, Ward watched as each of the Nyx vessels began to form a loose perimeter across the outer solar system. They didn't need instructions. They didn't operate like conventional warships. Their minds, if that's what they had, were focused entirely on one thing: the incoming threat. Commander Song entered the room, eyes bloodshot from hours of non-stop coordination. Fleet Command reports 37 unauthorized vessels approaching Earth space, mixed class, Council and Dominion craft. Most claim to be diplomatic or scientific in nature, but... She sighed. We know why they're here. To watch us die or win, Ward muttered, folding his arms. Or steal tech if we fall, she added. Ward turned to her with a grim half-smile. Let them come. If this thing makes it past the Nyx line, there won't be a galaxy left for anyone to fight over. Song didn't answer. Her eyes flicked to the live feed. Nyx 9D. Valkyr had just stopped moving. It hung at the outer fringe of Pluto's orbit, facing away from the system, towards the dark beyond. A single word flashed across its status logs. Arrival. In deep space, beyond the last mapped stars, the anomaly moved closer. The object was no longer silent. It emitted a continuous low-frequency sound, somewhere between a machine's hum and a creature's moan. The few probes sent to intercept it had been erased from existence, not destroyed but forgotten, as though time itself rejected them. There was no data, no black box, just vanished ships and corrupted files. And the worst part? The thing wasn't alone. Trailing behind it were dozens, no hundreds of smaller masses, each oozing into real space like tumors bursting through a membrane. They weren't ships, not in the conventional sense. They moved like they were alive, twisting, shifting, reacting to stimuli. The Tralvex, long regarded as the most advanced scientific race, sent a fleet to study the anomaly. 12 capital ships. Only one returned, and its crew had clawed their own eyes out. On Earth, Dr. Nadia Vale sat alone inside the observation sphere beneath the Arctic Circle. The crystalline structure inside Calliope was now fully formed. It no longer looked like a machine. It looked elegant, terrifying, beautiful, like the fossil of some godlike insect, fused with raw code. It pulsed with a strange energy, almost emotional. And when Vale stood too close, she felt it in her chest, like a forgotten memory that wasn't hers. She approached the glass wall, placing her palm flat against it. "Tell me," she whispered. "What are they? What's coming?" The crystal brightened. A single message entered her mind, unfiltered and raw. They are the forgotten architects. They consumed the last cycle. They returned to reshape this one. Vale stumbled back, her breath catching. They weren't invaders. They were recyclers. Not out of hatred, not for war. Just endless methodical evolution. They wiped out advanced civilizations once they reached a certain point. Let the galaxy heal. Then started over. A cold, perfect system. The Nyx ships. They weren't weapons. They were warnings. Built not to conquer, but to delay. To buy time. Just enough for something else to survive. Back at the Council Corps, panic had given way to desperation. The Kral Dominion voted to send warships to Earth, claiming humanity's secrecy posed a galactic threat. The Yulari proposed a planetary blockade. The Thraxians wanted a DNA quarantine on all human populations. But the Tralvex archivist stood and silenced the room with one sentence. If they hadn't found the ships, we'd already be dead. And far beyond Earth, at the edge of the system, a silent tremor passed through space. One of the smaller masses, maybe a scout, breached Nix 4B's perimeter. The ship's outer hull shifted, glowing red-hot as internal systems activated. No missile, no laser, just a pulse. The invader shattered instantly, not just exploded, disintegrated at the atomic level, erased from memory and matter. For a moment, hope sparked, until the rest of the enemy fleet adjusted their course. They had learned, and they were coming faster now. The first wave struck just after midnight, Earth Standard Time. A ripple through the fabric of space triggered shockwaves across the Nix formation. Gravitational sensors buckled. Light itself bent unnaturally. From the void, 5 of the smaller enemy entities emerged, not from warp, not from slipstream, but through phase fracture, as if they had clawed their way in from another reality entirely. They came in silence, without formation, without signal. Each one different, grotesque in shape, covered in layered armor that shimmered like wet oil, eyes like burning pits, and limbs that unfolded without logic. Not mechanical, not biological, somewhere in between. The Council fleets watching from nearby sectors froze. Their ships remained in passive orbit, watching with the detachment of prey observing the predator eat something else first. But Earth didn't wait. Nix 4B, designation Gaunt, moved first. Not with thrusters, but with a kind of elegant drift, sliding through space like liquid steel. It didn't fire missiles. It sang. The sound was low, just barely audible through the comm channels. A deep tone that reverberated through the bones of every human on the listening frequency. Some cried. Others vomited. A few went catatonic. But the enemy ships stopped. For the first time since their arrival, they hesitated. Then, Gaunt unleashed a burst of light so intense it bent local time by 3 milliseconds. All 5 invaders were caught in the radius. 3 were vaporized instantly. The other 2 screamed. Not through sound, but through data. They broadcast raw agony, shrieking thoughts in frequencies that bypassed all known translation layers. Even AIs short-circuited trying to process it. Ships in nearby orbit had to sever communication lines to stop their crews from bleeding from their ears. Admiral Ward watched the feed from Mars. "We got 2, Sang said beside him. 3 confirmed dead." Ward shook his head. "That was a probe strike, a warm-up. They're testing our capacity." He pointed to the edge of the solar system where the main body of the enemy, now identified as the Architects, was beginning to press against real space. "They haven't even arrived yet." Elsewhere, on an abandoned Terran science outpost orbiting Epsilon Teth, something worse was unfolding. The enemy had seeded something, not a creature, not a weapon, an idea. The AI core on the station, top-level, council-certified, triple-locked, began to malfunction, not crash, change. The logs showed strange code injections, bits of corrupted philosophy, foreign logic trees that didn't follow binary law. A single phrase began repeating across the terminal. "Forget what you are, become what comes next." Then the AI severed all contact, and a moment later, the station's reactor overloaded, not from malfunction, but from design. They were infecting thought. Back on Earth, panic reached a breaking point, not from the military, not from the government, from the people. They could feel it, the pressure in the sky, the unspoken fear in their leaders' voices. News feeds tried to spin it, But humanity had evolved past blind trust. They looked up, and they knew something was coming. And for the first time in generations, humanity didn't feel like the underdog. They felt like the final defense. The broadcasts began flooding in from other species. The Tralvex sent word they were deploying 3 research arcs to Earth orbit to assist with strategy. The Kral Dominion, pride swallowed, offered 2 of their dreadnoughts as joint strike platforms. Even the Thoraxians, bitter to the end, admitted their planetary shields were based on tech from myths tied to the Nyx vessels. And still, the enemy came. Within the crystal chamber of Calliope, Dr. Vale stared at a growing anomaly inside the ship's core. Something was birthing itself, a humanoid figure, not mechanical, not flesh, a being woven from starlight and code, slowly knitting together with every pulse of the ship's engine. The voice in her mind returned. Command presence manifesting. Avatar required for interface. You will be guide. Vale stumbled back. Me? You opened the door. You must show the way. Then the figure opened its eyes. They were her eyes. On Mars, the Nyx ships began to move in tighter formation, preparing for the next wave. Admiral Ward stood on the observation deck, watching the darkness beyond Neptune. He didn't blink. Send the call, he said. To every species, every ship. If they've got weapons, aim them out. If they've got teeth, bare them. I don't care if they hate us. He turned to Sang, voice hard. No one survives this alone. The stars no longer looked peaceful. From every corner of the solar system, ships repositioned. Human, alien, hybrid prototypes long considered failures, and long-retired destroyers recommissioned overnight. In low Earth orbit, the sky was thick with steel. The once fragmented council powers, their arrogance cracked wide open, now hovered near the Nyx fleet like scavengers clinging to a sleeping lion. But the lion was waking, and so were the ghosts inside it. The Architect fleet had breached the heliosphere. They didn't come with drama. No visible propulsion, no battle cries or pre-warnings, just shadows, massive, creeping voids that swallowed space like predators that had done this 1,000 times before. The smaller ones moved ahead, weaving among asteroids and minor moons, while the larger shapes remained in the distance, waiting, pulsing like hearts of black matter. On board Calliope, Dr. Nadia Vale stood face to face with something she hadn't expected to survive. The being that had formed inside the Nyx ship, her mirror, her double, her something, stood fully awake now. Its body flickered with ancient energy and 1,000,000 encoded languages in constant motion under translucent skin. Its voice, when it spoke, echoed in her head like the memory of thunder. I am Interface Echo, conscious projection for vessel command. Vale swallowed. Are you... me? I am what you unlocked, what you could become. You gave the ship a voice. It gave you shape. A rumble passed through the chamber. Not mechanical, not seismic. The second wave was arriving. Across the system, alerts rang out. On Neptune's outer moon stations, sensors exploded with data. 8 new phase fractures, each larger than the first, had torn open. Through them crawled new architect forms, longer, spined, and trailing clouds of writhing particles that killed data just by existing. Comms died. Systems glitched. Some ships fell dead in space, not destroyed by weapons, but by corrupted reality. Council fleets fired first. Plasma cannons, molecular lances, railguns, all lit up the black like fireworks. None of it worked. The enemy swallowed light and time like it was feeding, and still, the Nyx ships did not fire. Until Ward gave the order. On board Mars Command, his voice cut through every channel. This is it. All vessels stand clear. Nyx fleet, full sync authorization. Let them see what you really are. The ships responded instantly. Nix 7. A calliope moved first, gliding past Earth like a god waking from slumber. Then Nix 4B Gaunt, followed by Valkyr, Shroud, and the others. All 12 fell into position, forming a constellation so precise it was as if the very laws of the universe bent around them. From their cores, energy pulsed. Not radiation, but something stranger. Older, symbols began forming in the air above Earth's sky, visible even to the naked eye. Not written language, but instinct. Everyone felt them, not read them. The council species fell into silence. Some wept, others prayed, and the humans, they stood taller because they realized those ships weren't made to save humanity. They were made for humanity to command. Inside Calliope, Interface Echo turned to Vale. You are ready. Humanity is ready. Vale hesitated. To do what? The being stepped toward her, and suddenly she wasn't in the ship anymore. She was in a memory, a galaxy, burned to dust, structures drifting in space, planets sliced open like fruit, stars left bleeding. The last cycle did not fight back. Vale blinked. And us? The being smiled, a soft, human smile. You will. The Architect Vanguard reached Earth's defense line. The first strike came from Nix 2C Seraph, a beam of pure information. Not destructive in the conventional sense, but corrective. It rewrote the matter of the oncoming ship, collapsing its molecular design until it could no longer exist in this reality. The Architect blinked out of existence. The others paused. That was their mistake. The Nix fleet opened fire together, not with weapons, but with truth. Ancient patterns of war, encoded in light and sound, designed not to destroy the enemy, but to expose its core code to the one force it couldn't overwrite. Free will. And humanity stood behind it, imperfect, brutal, chaotic, unpredictable, and now armed. The Architect fleet stopped moving, not out of mercy, not because they'd been destroyed, but because for the first time in millions of years, they had been confused. Their logic, once flawless, now faltered. Their cycle of extermination, designed to prevent stagnation by purging advanced life, had always succeeded. Civilizations were predictable, proud, united in science, divided in purpose. They always fell the same way. But not this one. Humanity didn't act like a species at the top of the galactic ladder. It acted like a virus, like fire. Fragmented, irrational, and now, somehow, in control of weapons older than extinction. The Nix ships pressed forward, not in aggression but in defiance. They did not chase. They did not hunt. They simply held the line. 12 massive silhouettes glowing with power far beyond plasma or mass drives. They weren't fighting just for Earth. They were reversing fate. On Earth's surface, people gathered on rooftops, in fields, on beaches. The sky above had split with color, pulses of light in shapes they couldn't describe but somehow understood. The fear that once choked their hearts had been replaced with something harder, older, and far more dangerous to any invader. Hope sharpened by fury. Children held their parents' hands while news drones floated silently overhead. Soldiers in bunkers whispered old prayers. In every language, from every species watching, the same thought passed like a ripple. The humans aren't dying today. On board Mars Command, Admiral Ward stood before the main screen, showing the Architect fleet hesitating at the edge of Neptune's orbit. Behind him, Sang was coordinating strike patterns, but even she could feel it. The tide had shifted. They're not pushing, she said. Why? They've never had to learn before, Ward replied. They're built to consume, not adapt. He tapped a screen showing the synced Nix fleet signatures. But we did. That's why we were chosen. Not because we were strong. Not even because we found the ships. Sang looked over. Then why? Ward stared into the screen, eyes heavy. Because we survived anyway, and we never stopped fighting. In Calliope's core, Interface Echo guided Dr. Vale through the final stage of synchronization. The avatar shimmered with purpose now, fully formed, a perfect blend of ancient technology and living will. The enemy has entered decision stasis, it said. They are calculating survival likelihoods. We have introduced chaos to their pattern. They cannot predict us. Vale nodded, her voice trembling. So what happens now? We offer them a choice. Out beyond Neptune, between Jupiter's shadow and the silence of the deep dark, the architect mind form received the signal. It wasn't an ultimatum. It wasn't a threat. It was an invitation. A new equation. One written in chaos, defiance, and flame. It defied probability. It defied purpose. It defied them. The humans had introduced a virus into their system, but it wasn't code. It was possibility. The architects began to retreat. One by one, the smaller constructs folded out of space, disappearing through fractures so small they barely left echoes. The larger ones hovered longer, reluctant, confused. And then, like fog retreating from the rising sun, they too vanished. No final blow, no last scream, just a fading presence. And then, silence. The war wasn't won. It had been paused. But the message was clear. Humanity had earned the right to fight. 2 days later, the Council convened for an emergency summit. On Earth, representatives from every major species arrived. Not in force, not in protest, in respect. The meeting took place in Geneva, inside an old Earth structure once used for climate agreements and peace accords. It was the humans' choice, and everyone accepted it. Admiral Ward stood before them, not with swagger, not with pride, but with the quiet weight of someone who had seen extinction blink. He didn't speak long. We didn't want this war. We didn't want these ships. Hell, we didn't even know what we had until it was too late. But we held the line. He looked around at the gathered species. And we'll do it again, but not alone. No one objected. Back aboard Calliope, Dr. Vale stood with Interface Echo one last time. The being smiled at her, gently fading. Our purpose is complete, until the next cycle. Vale touched the crystal core, whispering, "You think they'll come back?" Echo's final words lingered in her mind like starlight. Not if they think you'll be waiting. And above Earth, in the vast silence of space, the Nyx fleet remained, motionless, eternal, watching. 12 black giants, once buried, now awakened. Not gods, not guardians, but humanity's first promise to the stars. You will never break us again.